All right, hello Covalence community, I'm Matt Landers and I'm here with Will Johnston, and we're going to do a little intro to TypeScript. So Will, how long have we been using TypeScript?
We've probably been using TypeScript for 6 years, maybe a little more than 6 years, when it was still in alpha. I started using it when I was working at Microsoft. For those who don't know, TypeScript is a product of Microsoft. So
invented by the person who also invented C#.
Yeah,
Anders Hausberg.
So naturally, when it came out, we were using it internally, and then eventually it became this open source project that everyone is using these days.
Yeah, and it's pretty awesome. So it's just JavaScript with a few extra features. One of the things, the main thing that it gives us is data types, so that we can start, having some inference at compile time and design time of what we're trying to pass to other functions, what's on the objects that we're using without having to guess or look up in the documentation, and we get Intellisense for that. And then we also can use state-of-the-art JavaScript, which is things that are coming out in JavaScript that browsers will eventually support, we can use today, and it will compile it to JavaScript that's compatible now.
And TypeScript is basically a superset of JavaScript that compiles down to normal JavaScript. And the goal of the TypeScript group when they first started out was, we need to create a way for us to use state-of-the-art features and add some sort of static type checking so you get development time errors, and then compile it down to JavaScript that is still readable by a human being. So let's not compile this down to something that no one can go in and edit if they absolutely have to.
Right. And if you've used Babel, you can take advantage of some of the state-of-the-art JavaScript using Babel as well, but TypeScript gives you that and the typings. So let's jump in and see how we would use this. So first of all, we're going to use Node and npm to install it. So we just say npm install TypeScript, and we're going to use the -g flag. And when we do that, it's going to give us a command line utility called tsc. And if we run that, it'll show us all the flags that we could use, which we're not going to worry about that right now. It's not really necessary. We don't need to use any flags out of the box. So we have that installed. Now let's go to our little project that we have here, and I'll just show you what we've got. We've got an index.html file, and it references an app.js JavaScript file. It's got two text boxes. One has they're both just numbers, and we have a submit button.
Yeah, an input type number, and we pulled in Bootstrap so it looks decent.
Yeah, so it looks like this. And then we have our JavaScript file. So right now we're not doing any TypeScript. We're just going to do this little test in JavaScript. I've just set this up where I've already got a reference to the two input boxes as num1 and num2. And we're just going to add those two together. So let's create a function called add. And we're going to take in a number 1 and number 2. And we're just going to return those. So this is hello world 101. And then we just need to console log out the result whenever they click the button. So I'm just in a click event handler here, and I'm going to call this add function. I'm going to take num1.value and num2.value and console log that out. So this is pretty simple. There's no errors here. Nothing's wrong with this. It should work, right? So let's go see what happens. So when I'm over here, I'm going to just say 5 + 4 and submit. And we outputted 54.
Yeah, and most of you probably caught the error while we were doing it, but what we have here is inputs. Even though it's input type number, the value of the input is a string. So we end up concatenating two strings together instead of adding two numbers, which is what we intended.
Very common problem. So no error when we ran it. So if we didn't catch this right away, we may, who knows how long this runs in our code, right?
Yeah, you can imagine a larger code base where you have errors like this all over your JavaScript, and you don't really know that there's a problem until something bad happens, right?
Right. So let's change this to TypeScript and see how it can help us. All that we have to do that is just rename this file from a JavaScript file to a TypeScript file. And now we're in Visual Studio Code here, so that's just a free editor from Microsoft. You can run it on any platform, but it supports TypeScript out of the box. So immediately we have an issue, and it's just saying that value doesn't exist on type element. So it knows based on this add event listener and the type of event, what should be passed in here. And it knows what these input boxes are as well.
Mm-hmm.
So right now it thinks because query selector returns just an element type, not an input element, it's returning that base class. We need to cast it into the input element.
If you're familiar with other statically typed languages, this is going to be immediately apparent why this is working. Right. But if you're just using JavaScript, it might be a little bit of a new thing, but not that hard to grasp.
Yeah, but if you've used Java or C# or any other typed language, you know what a cast is.
And if you've been using VS Code, sometimes you get Intellisense and you can mouse over things and it will give you the type of them, or it kind of uses the TypeScript notation. So you might be a little bit familiar with the TypeScript notation already.
Yeah, so now it knows that value actually does exist on this, and you'll see that it says HTML input element since we cast it here. And then we also want to add some typings to our add function because we don't want to add strings. We only want to add numbers. And all we have to do is hit colon and then a type here, and it will set that up for us. And now immediately TypeScript has said, hey, there's an issue here. You're not passing a number into the add function, and it requires a number. Value is a type string.
Yeah, so what's the specific error?
So the specific error is that we have a string and it's not assignable to type number. Exactly what you'd see in C# or some other language. So we need to cast that and convert it. So in JavaScript, we can use the number function constructor, and we'll do that. And now we've solved that problem. So without having to run the code, just in design time while we're coding, we found that error, fixed it, and now we can go compile this.
This can actually let you write a lot more code without having to test it, because you can feel more confident when you're writing TypeScript that what you're writing is going to work, right?
Right. So now all that we have to do now, so the browser doesn't understand TypeScript, so we got to go compile it with that little TSC thing that we have. So we just say tsc app.ts, and when we do that, it's going to output a JavaScript file, which now we see here. And we'll see that this file looks like JavaScript. You no longer have the cast here, no longer have the numbers here. It just got rid of all that, but it didn't mess up my JavaScript or make it ugly. It looks exactly how it would look if I had written it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So now when we run our code, say 5 plus 4 this time, we get 9.
Yeah, but we got here to this point without ever having to go out here and figure out that we were adding two strings together. TypeScript just figured that out for us.
Right. And then there's some other things that we can do in TypeScript as well. Like we can use some state-of-the-art JavaScript is what they say, which is basically things that aren't necessarily compatible in the browser today, but they exist in the JavaScript spec of tomorrow. So for instance, we can use the const instead of var, since these aren't going to change and we don't want you to be able to change them. We can use a fat arrow function here instead of the function.
Yeah, just go try to change num1 to something else and see what we get. So just reset num1 to like a number or something like that underneath there.
Oh yeah, here. So we can say num1 equals 3. And it says no. That's bad.
Yeah, and what's the error that it gives you there?
Cannot assign because it's a read-only property because we made it a const instead of a var.
Yeah, so we're getting all this good stuff with TypeScript, and you could even say, so let's leave num1 there, num1 equals 3, and say, well, let's change num1 back to var. Now change it back to var or let or something like that. Now we're getting a different error. 3 is not assignable to type HTML input element. And this is because when we originally assigned num1, it was the HTML input element, but now we're saying it should be a number. And TypeScript says, well, it's probably not a good idea. So I'm going to tell you that this is what's happening here, because somewhere else in the code, it might be trying to use it as an HTML input element, but here we're setting it to a number.
Right. So we'll change that back, we'll get rid of this, and then we'll go compile this and see what happens. So we're using, remember we're using this arrow function here, we've got these here. So let's compile it, and we have const in there as well. And when we look at our compiled JavaScript, it changes this back to a normal function. It gets rid of const so that this will work in the browser.
Mm-hmm.
And you can choose in TypeScript what version of JavaScript to compile to. So if we were in Node or something that supports const and supports fat arrows, we could have it actually output that advanced JavaScript as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll do that in some future videos and show you how to create configuration files and use other typings as well. But yeah, so
the last little piece of this, let's show a little bit about Intellisense. So one thing we see in here is we have our event listener, and you can see this is a click event listener. The event object is a mouse event. So let's see if TypeScript knows what's on this mouse event. We can say e dot and look at this. We see all these different properties that are on mouse event. And based on the icon over on the left, you can see that TypeScript knows all the properties that are on here. It's not guessing. There's no guesswork involved. All of these are known.
And if you use Visual Studio Code in the past, you've used it for JavaScript, you know that TypeScript's pretty good at guessing, but it's not always perfect.
Yeah, so VS Code is going to guess here.
And we're in the JavaScript file.
Yeah, and we're in the JavaScript file. And these are all guesses. All these little things with this icon over the left, it's saying, well, these might exist, but we know just based on us being developers here that there's no e.num1.
Right.
But for more complicated files, you may not know that. And that's why it's nice to have TypeScript, because it only tells you what it definitively knows.
Right. And then in the TypeScript file, it knows, because it's checking for you now, that it is a mouse event type. All right, well, that's the intro to TypeScript. Hopefully you've seen how TypeScript can be really beneficial to your development and productivity, and definitely find a lot of errors that you may not even know existed in your code.
Yeah.
We've seen people turn large JavaScript files into TypeScript files and immediately find things that are broken that they didn't even know were broken. So it's pretty cool. Check it out. And then check out our future videos on TypeScript where we'll go into some more advanced stuff with it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.